Into the minds of those who find satisfaction in sending unsolicited nudes. Unforbidden territory, my friends. As an unlicensed psychologist, I think we can all agree that the world of those who do something so vulgar has got to be a world so depressing that I would be amazed if you were to last more than 15 minutes within this miserable wonderland without finding yourself hanging on a noose. But I always wonder, why would somebody bring themselves so low in performing such a disgusting and vile act? What exactly are these people hoping to achieve when using the vast world of social media as an opportunity in exposing themselves? Could it be a sexual inner thrill, an abnormal way to express one's sexual behavior, or maybe because they have a severe lack in self-confidence, fully committed to the idea that there is no success for them in life, rejecting themselves under their own terms? Unsolicited nudes is a language that speaks very loud with actions. It's a language that screams, "I'm pathetic. I have no confidence. I am worthless. I am a coward. I am selfish. I don't know how to love. I am such a pitiful human being. This is as close as it gets in experiencing compassion, love, and happiness." But seriously, what would drive a person into bringing themselves so low? I mean, wouldn't it be better to face rejection and build up your own character? Well, I think Frank Hatchell may be the perfect candidate who can shed some light on that mystery. A man who didn't have much of a happy upbringing. A child who was shy, slow, awkward, completely lacking a personality, and often forgotten by his family. Frank was one of those people who grew up with the world not knowing or caring of his existence. A recluse who never bothered standing up for himself out of fear of being kicked down again. A bench warmer who was never included within any games at school by the other kids. No friends to socialize with, not even a single date with a girl. And eventually Frank grew into a young adult who was committed into being unwanted, unimportant, something that had no place nor value in this world, until he met her, Susan Anderson. Susan Anderson, my friends. A different creature who had everything that Frank desired in life. A beauty who was never without love, praise, and indulged herself over this power she had over men. A goddess that relished every minute of being worshipped by all those men, and admired and envied by the other women who felt that they will never be on her level. Oh, how quickly the boys chased after her, pathetically throwing themselves at her feet. How these men would fall hard for her, even going so far as to ruining their relationships and lives just to be in her arms, to win her love, only to find their sacrifice and efforts being awarded with a soft touch and a brief moment of her attention. These men giving so much, only to be given so little. And poor Frank, whose only effort for this goddess was offering to buy Susan a soda before he would cave in, when the wave of handsome men would intervene his efforts. All these men who wanted to please their mistress. But it was on a rainy day when Frank's luck would turn in his favor, when finding Susan walking home, by herself. A sudden spark of courage within Frank to make his move, an opportunity for Frank to make an impression, to win Susan's love by showing how much of a gentleman and caring person he truly is, by offering to walk this beautiful lady home during this horrible weather. This is it. This is the moment when the girl of his dreams will see that Frank is good for her. And guess what? She agreed. Well, even though Frank mustered enough courage to approach Susan, the man couldn't bring himself into muttering a single word. Instead of carrying on a normal conversation, just an awkward silence that ended up with Frank becoming a bit frustrated in his lack of confidence. A sudden and desperate need to take an advantage of this moment, which is why his desperation, a need for things to go his way. Frank began developing a scheme when they were coming up on Maxwell's barn. Now if it had been any other man, Susan would have known the motives when Frank requested to take a shortcut through the barn. Maybe take a moment to dry off from the rain. But Susan seen Frank as someone who was harmless, something that was not a threat. Susan was convinced that Frank wouldn't dare think of trying something foolish. Oh, Frank. Poor, pitiful Frank. How many men would love to be in his shoes right now, seeing Susan removing her wet coat, watching him trembling at the sight of her mesmerizing body, that inner desire for Susan growing immensely when Frank realized the fact that he was alone with her in this barn. Oh, how Susan would bring so much bliss into Frank's miserable and lonely life. And Frank finally giving in to these urges. He knows what kind of girl Susan is. He knows what Susan wants when seeing her with those other men, and Frank holding her tightly by the arms. Why else would Susan agree to let Frank walk her home? Agree to take this moment to rest in Maxwell's barn, alone, together. He sees the way she looks at him. Frank knows that Susan wants him. He's crazy about her. He's good for her. Yeah. And so what if Susan enjoys the company of men? Real men. Strong, handsome, rough. Just the way she likes them. Not something that's sad and pitiful like Frank. The man can't even take care of himself. How the hell is he supposed to handle a woman like Susan? She needs a man, not some spineless coward that's not even worth a second of her time. Even if Frank were to be the last man on earth, Susan wouldn't even think of the idea of being with something like Frank. And those inner feelings of blissful lust within Frank fading away, those expectations transitioning into a burning rage after being scolded by Susan, his desires for Susan quickly turning into a bloodthirsty desire to teach this cold-hearted bitch a lesson for her cruelty. And grabbing the axe that was nearby, Frank didn't even let Susan mutter a scream before chopping her head off with one clean swipe. Oh, how ecstatic it felt when Frank saw Susan's head rolling off to the side, the excitement of unleashing this fury, the ecstasy cascading him as he maintained his course of chopping into Susan's body again and again and again and again. When it was finally done, Frank's body trembling and his hands gripping the axe tightly, he felt no remorse when seeing the limbs and blood everywhere. Literally the most enlightening experience he ever had. Susan's hacked-up corpse being Frank's most proudest accomplishment in his miserable life. And how excited Frank was to share this glorious moment with his family and the world. Yeah, he's gonna fry for this alright, but before they throw the switch, the world will know how Frank truly felt when he killed Susan Anderson. Now you would think that Frank's family would have taken him seriously when he came home boasting and priding himself over Susan's murder. Except, Frank immediately found a damper to his triumphant moment when his father, mother, and sister didn't believe him. What'd he do? Chop Susan up into tiny little pieces and ate her all up? No, Frank didn't eat her up. He doesn't have the nerve to kill a roach, let alone a human being. Instead, they found Frank's details in murdering Susan as a way to get attention, a morbid sense of humor that was not welcome, a repulsive act that only brought more disappointment in his family, that Frank would go so far to make up silly and disgusting fairy tales. It's truly sad how far Frank would go for attention. Poor boy who never had the confidence within himself, not like his brother and sister. His parents were not even surprised when watching him running out of the house in a crying fit because of how nobody found his morbid sense of humor amusing. Probably that girl, Susan, rejected him and just can't handle it. It's a pity how Frank needs validation from others to feel accepted. That's his problem. No matter how many times his family tries talking to him, he just doesn't do things for himself. The boy needs therapy. Watch as some people start saying that Susan was the kind of girl who was axing for it. But no, the real horror of this story is Frank, a man who is committed to the idea that he cannot succeed in life. And in a fit of rage, all those years of disappointment and self-pity, turning Frank into a bloodthirsty monster that wanted to destroy and ruin something that he cannot have. Instead of achieving confidence and self-success, he rather fell and rejected himself under his own terms. In his warped mind, Susan's murder was his own way of succeeding. I wonder how many feel worthless in this world, that their success and self-image heavily depends on the validation of others. How many self-loathing creatures have an inner desire to see others destroyed and ruined when seeing something they cannot have, too afraid to succeed for themselves, that in their minds all it takes is a simple unsolicited picture of themselves to see someone suffer for rejecting their selfish advances, thus making this an achievement within their miserable, pathetic lives. But what happens if you just ignore these efforts? Just laugh them off as sad jokes that they truly are, denying and discarding these pathetic attempts for selfish endeavors and vengeance that infects one's messages on the world of social media? In time, they fade away. They stay down on the ground, letting the world walk all over them. They die off with a faint whimper that will go unheard. When Frank's family went looking for him when he never returned home that evening, they were not prepared for what they found in Maxwell's barn. According to the authorities, they called it a tragic case of a murder and suicide. And what was supposed to be Frank's greatest achievement, that credit ended up going to an ex-boyfriend, a local bad boy who was a bit too violent and controlling. A nasty argument prior to Susan's murder. It didn't take long before authorities connected the boyfriend to Susan's death. The jury 1 hour to find him guilty, and the judge showing no mercy for that woman-beaten piece of murdering trash to fry in the chair. Trust me, a lot of people were happy when that boyfriend fried, screaming his innocence. And well, seeing how Frank was madly in love with Susan, it must have been too much for Frank when he found her chopped up remains, and decided to hang himself. A lesson can be learned from this story. The world never revolves around a person. It never will. And if you're the kind of idiot who dreams of the world going your way, or you have convinced everyone else that it is, one day, when you least expect it, don't be surprised when you end up getting what you asked for, when your stupid fairy tale thinking faces reality, more like what you're getting axed for.